Hello, my name is Elizabeth McKibben. You can call me Liz. I am a PhD candidate at Victoria University of Wellington, based in the North Island of New Zealand. I'm just wrapping up my first year of my PhD, so today's presentation is more aspirational than informative. But I thought this would be a great opportunity just to present some of the hopes and dreams, the way that I intend to draw upon posthuman autoethnography in my research going forward. The title of today's presentation, "And Yet Still I Practice," emerges from my own frustrations with the yoga industry. I started practicing yoga when I was 13 years old, and I had a 17-degree curve in my spine, scoliosis, and was taking antidepressants to manage major depressive disorder. So I started taking yoga at the behest of my doctors, and within 4 years, two amazing things had happened. One, I was no longer reliant upon SSRIs to manage my day-to-day mood, and two, my spine had completely straightened. Yoga was transformative for me, needless to say, and so immediately thereafter, I began to teach yoga at my undergraduate university. My master's research centered around the impacts of yoga for mental illness stigma, and then afterwards, I traveled the world as a yogipreneur, if you will, a traveling yoga teacher. And throughout this journey, I started off very adamant about yoga as a panacea, as something that was for everybody. But through my teaching and through my experiences practicing, I began to observe more and more the ways that the yoga industry is quite exclusive, where it claims to be all about self-love and yet holds on to a lot of discourses such as that of fat aversion. And I wanted to break down my own complicit engagement in these harmful discourses as a young, cis, white, able-bodied, educated woman who really believes in the potential that yoga could have. How am I unknowingly perpetuating these harms? And what can I do to help break down these structures and patterns in teaching and in the industry that are rendering yoga inaccessible to a lot of people? So that's at the heart of my presentation and my PhD as a whole. So we'll start with a few key concepts and then apply them to autoethnography. First slide. Do I look like I do yoga? You tell me. The visual aesthetic of yoga is quite well documented. A lot of visual discourse analyses have looked at the covers of yoga magazines and categorized the majority of image as being, young, thin, white, able-bodied people. And that a lot of the demographic of the yoga practice, at least in the West, replicates inequities and is reproducing the same social structures, the same hierarchies, the same power imbalances that we see elsewhere in the world, which is ultimately limiting access to potentially a really beneficial health and well-being resource from a lot of people. Now, recent research that has sought to visibilize, ironically, the harms of this aesthetic of yoga have drawn on autoethnography and narrative accounts. We see a lot of Black feminist, indigenous scholars, yogis from around the world who have told their stories of navigating racism and sizeism in yoga spaces and are reflecting on the ways that their voices can be amplified in order to draw the yoga space into what it's intended to be, which is something of spiritual liberation and well-being and health. But I was particularly inspired by Practicing Yoga as Resistance, which is a text, a book that has brought together a lot of different voices, and was really struck by not only just how powerful these narratives were, but also by how little there was coming from people who hold power, trying to deliberately and intentionally confront, or be in a process at least of confronting that power that they hold in order to provide a yoga for social justice. And that made me think about how my work could do that. In this body, I am so much a part of all of those privileged identities. In what way could I draw on my experience, honor my experience, without producing another narrative of white fragility, another navel-gazing exploration of myself? And that is what has turned me towards posthuman theory. So posthumanism, posthuman theory, some of you may be familiar with it, is a paradigm or way of knowing about the world that posits that material things hold agency in meaning-making processes, and that it is through the relationships between people, discourses, places, environments in which meaning is created. And this does two awesome things. One is that this philosophy is very much aligned with the ontology of yoga, where the mind, body, and environment are all on the same plane and made up of the same kind of characteristics. So I thought, okay, that's good. Those two things are aligned. And it also presents opportunities for decentering the human in meaning-making processes. Now, one such process and one theory within the posthumanism paradigm that I really love is that of agential realism, coming from feminist physicist Karen Barad and her concept of diffractive reflexivity, which we'll talk about in a second. So this theory draws on a light experiment, which is very hard science and probably too much so for me to explain, but Karen Barad does a really great way of explaining it with metaphor. For those of us social scientists, might be a little easier to grapple with. One of the object situated in between two mirrors. So let's say you have an object, let's say a pair of yoga pants, situated in between two mirrors. The geometric patterns that are reflected in both of those two mirrors are going to be the same. They're going to repeat against each other over and over again. And so you're going to get the same thing repeating itself, which is good and well, and it shows us interesting things about the seer and the seen. And so there are a lot of great, theoretical things we can draw from that. But within agential realism, the object in itself holds other potentials for creating meaning based on the relationship with those two mirrors and their orientation. So when we take one of those mirrors and pop it off to the side, well, then the geometric patterns that are created in either of the mirrors are new. They're different. And thus the object and the meaning of the object that we can see in those mirrors has a new potentiality. And so this is the theory that I'm going to be drawing on in my PhD and applying it to autoethnography. Posthuman autoethnography hasn't received as much attention, though I see it as an emerging field or emerging applied methodology, because of the tension between a human-centered method and a paradigm that's all about material agency. When we apply the Karen Barad's ideas of agential realism to autoethnography, at first we might see something like this, where we have the autoethnographer situated as the object in between those two mirrors, and there's a refraction going back and forth, and we see the same patterns, ideas, the same meanings replicated over and over again. However, in our posthuman autoethnographic approach, the object is no longer the autoethnographer. The object of the research, rather, could be the body, or the yoga pants, or the potted plant, whatever it may be. The autoethnographer has a responsibility then to adjust the mirrors off to the side, and the process of moving that mirror to create new patterns, that is the autoethnography. So this is going to be applied in my work through autoethnographic collage, which is drawing on diffractive cuts and a process developed by Holly Thorpe, cutting together a part. So here we have an image of myself that I took in 2018 when I was teaching yoga at a surf retreat in Costa Rica. Already you can see how it embodies a lot of the aesthetic ideals of the yoga practice, what it looks like to be a yoga person. And it also holds a lot of affective meanings for myself. I think back to a time where I was probably in the best physical shape of my life, the nostalgia of living so close to the ocean in a remote place. And so there are a lot of sort of a lot of memories, a lot of feelings associated with this place and the images and the things that you see represented here. So what I'm going to do is cut it apart. Literally printing out a piece, printing out the picture, taking scissors, cutting through it. And in this action, I cut through these aesthetic representations of myself, these aesthetic privileges, or the aestheticization of these privileges, breaking them down and then reassembling them into something new, into a collage of sorts. And as I go through this process, I document the feelings that come up in this material method. For example, how does it feel when I decapitate myself, as I seem to have done in this example? And drawing on those experiences, the deconstructing of that aesthetic quite literally and viscerally in my hands, and reconstructing it as my process of posthuman autoethnography that seeks to reassemble or deassemble and then reassemble the privileges that I hold as a yoga teacher, as a yoga practitioner, and as somebody interested in using our stories and experiences to change the world. So with some of the implications, maybe, hopefully, we can start to establish some boundaries or de-establish some boundaries of posthuman autoethnography. What are the limits of this method within this theory? What can we do with it? Are there any new possibilities? I feel that I might have some creative ideas bubbling up that will I'll use in the next year or so. I want to unravel and disentangle some of the contradictions that are in this yoga industry, perpetuating certain aesthetics while holding an opposing contradictory discourse. And I want to deconstruct norms and reconstruct them into something new. Whether or not that's entirely effective, I do not know. I hope it can be. And I hope that this research at least does something for not just our theory, although that would be great, but also for helping to inform the yoga industry in a positive way. So that is my presentation. Thanks for your time. Here are my references. I really look forward to discussing with you any ideas that you may have or thoughts or comments. Thank you so much.